Good evening, everyone, and welcome to week 5, or the first Cascading Style Sheets lecture. So last week we had a look at Crown Casino's website, and let me just make this window slightly smaller so I can see everyone's chat. So we had a look at Crown Casino, and in the lecture notes I had a look at a shipping, well, an ex-Sydney Ferry pleasure cruise business that has a similar problem trying to appeal to different markets. So what I'm hoping you got out of last week's chat was that there are some things that we need to look out for, such as contrast. And there's a contrast calculator that I showed you that gives you some advice on whether your contrast is WCAC or W3AC compliant. And hopefully you've got some ideas of not only user interface design, but also some color choices and things of that nature. So this week we're going to be looking at actual cascading style sheets, and this is how we actually add color and padding and backgrounds and all sorts of prettiness to a website. Now, a few of you, I'm just scanning the list, see if there's a Nathan in the list. Some of you are way ahead and already implementing smooth scrolling and that parallax effect I was asking for. So I'm glad to see some of you are ahead. But please don't feel nervous if you're seeing CSS for the first time. We've still got a few weeks before assignment 2 is due. So are there any questions that have arisen since last week that I can quickly answer? And whilst I'm waiting for you to reply, I will say I've just rechecked assignment 1 grades, and at the moment I think I've got I think it's somewhere between 70 and 80 submissions. And of those, I've got 10 that still need to just tweak something in their assignment. So it might be HTML4 deprecated code is still present. An invite to GitHub, the avatar is too big or too small. And there aren't enough GitHub commits to GitHub or Bitbucket. So if you can check your assignment, just make sure you've got 5. There's only 2 grades. There's 0.1, which is temporary, and 5. And I want everybody to get 5 as soon as possible. So just want to make sure that my voice is coming through. I know there's a small delay between the chat and my voice here. Okay, I'll soldier on regardless. Excellent. Thanks, Alexander. It's getting a little bit paranoid there. Okay, so this week's tute. Oh, did I? No, thought things were missing there. So in the lecture, there are a number of ways of including style or style sheets. So the sort of best way, most website friendly way, is to have an external style sheet. So at the moment there's a link in your sort of website under construction page, which I've supplied. Now, I have posted an announcement, but essentially it used to be this, but I've just decided to make things a little bit simpler, but I forgot to update the href to the correct address. So if you're having troubles getting your styles to come through, just make sure that that text has been deleted. Now there's another issue which a few of you have run into. So you're making updates to your code, but that code is not coming through to, when you press refresh, it's not coming through. Sometimes web servers do make shortcuts. So what they'll do is they won't serve the latest version if you've requested recently a resource such as a style sheet. So I've got a workaround. So instead of having code like this, we can actually use PHP to make sure that a fresh copy is sent to the client every time. And you just need to replace that external style sheet with this. So I tend to use this for when I'm developing, so that the style sheet is sent down every time. And the same thing is going to happen when we start programming in JavaScript. So sometimes the JavaScript file is not going to come down, and you'll need to do this for JavaScript as well. So this is sort of like a temporary fix, and then once your website is developed, you can switch back to the proper way, if you like, of having a link tag delivering your style sheet. So that's the external way, and the advantage of this way is that any number of web pages can have access to that style sheet. In our assignment, there's only one web page, I suppose, but in another type of website, you might have multiple pages. So the good thing is every time you press refresh, as I said before, sometimes the server will just your browser and the server won't bother getting a fresh copy. They'll just use the copy you've already downloaded. So it does save time. Once the server's coding and developing is finished, this can be a bit of a time saver. So as I say, this is the recommended way, and the way that I'm hoping you will do this in your assignment. But there's another way of just embedding style just into one page. So you can open up a style tag and put some CSS declarations inside. And that's kind of okay, as long as there's maybe just some small fixes that are required by that page. But it is something that's not really it's not something that's promoted in the industry. It's better to have all the style in an external style sheet. And there's a third way of just having some inline style, which has kind of a high priority rating, and this style will only affect one element. And this is pretty much the worst type of way of including style into a page, but this can be a good way if you're using JavaScript to modify an element's style directly, just to basically have it there. And what I tend to do is I tend to sort of develop, I'll mess around with this style just to get something working, and then once I've got it working, I'll either move it here or ultimately into external style sheets once I've got something working. So sometimes this also gets around the issue of the style sheet not coming through when you press refresh. So I've got a bit of a question here. So I think I've explained this one. What are the benefits of having external style sheets? You can have one style sheet servicing a number of different pages. And I've got a hash content, and I've got a .more, and I'd just like you guys to just explain, or to just post what you think the hash and the dot character might be representing. So Ray's got it right. So hash means an ID. So basically an element with an ID equal to content is going to be identified using this selector. and dot more, it'll basically look for any elements, and that's plural, that have the class more. And we'll see soon that this is a more specific selector, so it generally gets a higher priority than something that's just a class selector. So in the code, what I've got is I've got a div whose ID is content. So this is definitely matching this. And in this example, I've got a space and then a span. So this is selecting any spans inside content that can be found. So if we have a look, we've actually got some words here that are inside a span. So somewhere inside content, there's a span, and we want that color to be red. But we also have a sort of like a conflict here. We've also got a similar style, and what we've got is span class equals more. So on one hand, this style might color the text red, and this style, because it's class, it might color the text in this color green. So we will be looking at color soon, but essentially 0, that's the red channel, 255, that's the green channel, so that's full on green, and 0 blue is glowing bright green. And the alpha channel, for anyone out there who loves Photoshop, that gives the background some transparency, or gives the color some transparency. So whatever the background color is, it will be mixed half and half with bright green. So it's like a sort of translucent overhead transparency green. So I want you to have a little play of that for yourself, and just work out whether this more is going to have green words or red words. So lines 11 and 14, I think I've answered this as well. The difference between class and ID selectors, and just to sort of focus you to the answer I'm looking for. There are no restrictions for the number of class elements. So any number of elements can have the same class, but only one element in a web page should have a particular ID. So are there any questions on this, if you like, introduction example to CSS? And I should point out this H1, this is getting virtually an ID kind of selector. So only this H1 element will be styled with a navy color. Samiroslav saying not yet. That's good to know. So what we've just seen is some elements being styled directly by where they're located in the hierarchy. So something space something means anything, any span inside another element. But sometimes we want to style elements based on their state, essentially. So the most obvious one, which I've got here, is hyperlinks. So there are separate styles depending on the status or the state of each link. So an unvisited link, so if you want a style to be directly applied to an unvisited link, you just say a colon link. So the colon denotes that this is actually a pseudo class or a pseudo state. And any visited link, you can also style that to have a separate color. And I'm going to ask a question. Does anybody know the default colors for these two pseudo states? anyone who's used Google should know this almost up front. And then we've got two, if you like, interacted states. So if you have a mouse and you're hovering over an element, the hover state will take effect. And Miroslav has got it. It's a blue-purple, so unvisited links are blue or navy, and purple is for visited links, which is okay for links if you care whether you visited them before. So when you're Googling stuff, you don't want to click on a link you've already Googled and found to be wrong. But for the most part, inside websites, sometimes sometimes you want the link and the visited tied together. You don't want your menu bar to look different. Now the active link, this is really only takes into effect when you actually click on the link. So whilst the mouse is down, it will change color. So if you want a little flash, just to show that that link is being clicked, then there is a separate style. But it's quite common to tie these two styles together just so that those two effects are similar. So there is this this rule called the love-hate rule. So this is how we join two styles together. So we say one thing, comma, another thing. So we can provide a list of styles to join together, and we can style the hover and active together as well. So this is using the love-hate rule, and you may be asked to program links this way, or to style hyperlinks this way, sorry. But in our assignment, we're going to be doing something a little bit trickier, but you might find having the love-hate rule might be a good start to making your navigation bar look good. So these aren't the only pseudo states. We can also make stripy tables, and I'd like to drag, maybe I can drag a little bit. So no, I was actually going to drag Gradebook over, but I'm not going to. Unfortunately, Gradebook has got some nice stripy rows, but I'm showing people's personal information, so I don't think I should do that. So what we've got is you can actually make, say, the first list element of a list one color, and the last element another color. But if you want stripy elements, you can this one will color all the odd numbers. So it's like 2n plus 1, so that'll be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. If you want even numbers, you just have to say 2n, and that'll color the second row, fourth row, sixth row, eighth row, etc. And you can have tricolor as well. So if you want to have 3n plus 1, 3n plus 2, you can have 3 colors as well. And so Miroslav's just worked out how that alternate gray and white colors coming from. And yeah, that's I'm pretty sure you guys have got a view in Canvas which shows you that. Now I've just noticed in Canvas my picture seems to be broken, which is interesting. I might make a note and fix that. Wonder what happened there. So apologies at the moment. My face is missing from Canvas. I hope that's just a temporary thing. Now, there's another type of pseudo styling, and in CSS2, even though there was a difference, there wasn't a difference as far as programmers or developers were concerned. So, but CSS, I don't know who made this decision. It really frustrates me. To make a pseudo element, we need to use 2 colon characters. But at this stage, I don't know any browsers that actually will fail if you only use 1 colon. So I'm hoping in CSS4 they'll roll this back and say, oh, we can program computers to do that job. We don't need developers to know the difference. But there's a subtle difference. Pseudo elements are elements that don't actually exist. So pseudo classes, like the hyperlinks, they do exist, but depending on what state those elements have, they'll be styled differently. Pseudo elements are elements that don't actually exist, and a new virtual element is created. And as soon as you get that concept, the whole difference between these 2 styles will make sense. So I've got one example here where I want to style all of the text that happens to be on the first line of a paragraph that's inside an element with the ID leader. And no matter how big or small I make the window, that only the first line will be styled in that way. Likewise, underneath, any paragraph that's in an element, it might be an article or a div or section with the class story, only the first letter will be styled differently. So if you want to write any sort of story books like Once Upon a Time, and you want to have a very ornate first letter, this is how you can style it using CSS. Another thing people do is block quotes. You know, they'll put some little open quotation marks, and I think this one is like I don't know if it's a curly quotation mark, but it's a Unicode character. So element 201C, that's a hexadecimal number. I think that's pretty high up in the Unicode character set. So so I've got a feeling that is probably one of the curly quotes. You can make the font size bigger so that it's big and bold, and give a little bit of margin to the right so that it's it just sort of like pushes the text over a little bit. So what this does is this actually creates a new element, so you don't actually have to put a quote into the element. It'll actually decorate your block quote with an open quote, essentially. And I've got a matching one afterwards. So after the block quote, it will put in, if you like, the opposite quote, the closing curly quote. And a similar thing, font size 300%, so it's the same size, but in this case, I've got a margin left, so it's pushing the end quote away from the right side. So I've got similar questions here. Miroslav, yes, you've asked the right question. So sometimes when you're reading an article, they'll have just like a little sound bite or a little section that they've lifted just to kind of attract users into the page. So it's like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to read this article. So you might look at some of the pictures, and then you might look at a block quote and you think, yeah, it's worth my time reading the article. One really common example is referrals or recommendations. So, you know, We really love the cinema. The renovations are amazing, says Jane Smith of, small town, wherever your cinema is based. So you might want to think about, if that kind of thing attracts you, that's a good application for block quotes. And also, when you have a block quote element, that means search engines can understand it's a block quote as well. So they may index that a little higher or lower depending on the content people are looking for. So I just want to make the point, this sometimes pops up, that even though the element leader is unique, you can have any number of paragraphs in the leader block. So that means every paragraph, there's 5 or 6 in the leader block, they'll all get this style. Whereas this one, this means there can be any number of blocks with the story, and of course any number of paragraphs inside the story block. Each story block will get the first letter style this way. So even though sometimes you can have, and if you like ID equals about us or ID equals seats, you can have a style that applies to all paragraphs inside that block, which is a lot better than coding every single paragraph with a particular class. And then in HTML5, the number of pseudo-states were quite limited. They probably thought there were enough of them, but we have got a lot of new pseudo-states in HTML5, sorry, CSS5. Let me just open this up. Oops. Oh, this is another one which, because of touch screens, obviously not every screen has got a mouse attached to it. So there's another pseudo state, which is it's like a focus. So sometimes different browsers handle it slightly differently, but you can sort of tab to get the focus. So sometimes that does work. I'm just scrolling down. I'm looking for the new ones. So this is the focus pseudo state, which might help on touch screens. But we have a lot more now. We've got if a text field or an email field or a password field is empty, we can style it differently. And this one's interesting, the enabled element. I just want to make sure I've got this right. So by default, elements are enabled, but you can disable them. So if you want to style any enabled element that you can enter text in, you can. So maybe style the background green or something. And there's usually a similar one. So if an element's disabled, you can change the style of that to be different. But these are the really nice ones that we had to do a lot of programming in JavaScript to recreate. So if you've got a field where you're allowed to enter any number, but you have a number that needs to be within a certain range, you can say, if the date's within the right range or a number's within the right range, you can style it one way. And I think they'll be out of range down here. There's an out of range there as well. Optional elements, so if an element's not required, you can style it a certain way. Um, so invalid, that's another one. So if someone's entered in some information that's not valid, you can just use CSS to style that element without requiring any JavaScript. So in order to get that, you can either have min and max attributes, say in a number field or a date field, or we will see in the JavaScript area a pattern attribute. So you can write a regular expression that that the input a user puts in is tested against a pattern. If it matches that pattern, it's valid, and if it isn't, it's invalid. And I'm not sure. This is another helpful one, the selection. So by default, when you mouse over something, you get a certain highlight showing you've selected it, but you can change the color of that as well. Lachlan, yep, you definitely, you can go completely nuts. There's a sort of rule, it's the 80-20 rule, that 80% of the effect can be created with 20% of the effort, and that remaining 20% will take 80%, and theoretically 80% of that 80% can, is 20%. So when you're always chasing down that last 1% of finish, it can take a lot of effort. So one little thing that I generally do before I sort of optimize my CSS is I'll have different style sheets, just so that things don't get too complicated in one style sheet. So it's very easy to lose color and formatting and sort of layout styles together, but that's just one thing I do to try and try to keep my head when I get into that over-styling phase of developing in a project. Oops, that's the lab, sorry. So any questions regarding pseudo states and also pseudo elements? So I'll say that again, pseudo classes and pseudo elements. Whilst I'm waiting for that, I'll just load the next slide up, or the next section up. And I just want to draw your attention to this warning. This is how not to style. It's quite common to style this way. But it does there is a reliance on having lots of IDs and classes in code, and this was very common, I like to say, in the XHTML era, somewhere between, say, 2002 and 2012 sort of thing. So I have put in this warning message saying this is a counterexample. It's an example of bad code, but you will see, especially even on W3 schools, they will have examples that are very much like this, where you're having to put in class equals nav links into every link. And using contextual selectors, we can get around this example. So Alexander saying you haven't got questions yet because you need to let all these things sink in. So, yep, I fully appreciate that. So what I want to do now is just draw your attention to this. So I've got a navigation element. Notice I don't say div id equals nav. That's very XHTML sort of 2005 way. I've actually got navigation. So it's a HTML5 dedicated element. And I want to style every link. So naively, I've added a class called navlinks. And it's only a matter of time before someone makes a mistake and mistypes nav, and you've got bad or something. So what's going to happen is this link is not going to be styled in the same way as the above. So reflecting back on the contextual selector, what we can see is we've actually got a navigation element here. And so we can actually change this. So we can say, so this is a much better way of doing it. So I'm just looking at, say, this style here. This is a sort of foolproof way of styling the active link, and I'll pop in the hover state there as well. So if you imagine these styles, you'd put them here. And so what you're doing is you're saying any hyperlink that's being hovered over inside the navigation element, I want a certain style to be applied. And then I don't need this. I can actually delete this class. And one of the philosophies with model view controller type architecture programming is to try and reduce the amount of, if you like, view code that's inside the model code. So at the moment, this is almost like saying style equals navlinks, whatever the navlink style is. So sometimes this is useful, but if you find that you're retyping this on every line, it's a better idea to see if there's a way of having a contextual selector in its place instead. And it's less code, and it is a lot neater as well. So that's a little bit of advice, and I do try and catch as many people as I can before we get too deep into CSS programming. And another thing we can do, and I'm going to ask you to think, what is this link doing? So as soon as you work it out, feel free to type in the chat. So what we're doing is we're actually looking, we're looking for a hyperlink that has an attribute called target. And you can do that if you don't care what its value is. But if you do care what its value is, you can say target equals underscore blank. And I've thrown in a pseudo state just to show you how complicated things can get. So I'm putting something after a particular type of hyperlink. So Miroslav says it opens a page after clicking it. That's what happens maybe when you click on a link in general, but this is, if you like, it's styling a particular hyperlink. Timothy's got it. I'm actually adding an icon after the link, and I'm selecting. Andres is chiming in now. So any link that happens to open in a new window is going to get styled in a particular way. And I'll show you an example of some hyperlinks that use this. As soon as I quickly log in. So I'll just paste the link here. So what I've got in this navigation, there's this might be a little bit tiny, but I am moving my mouse around it. This is, if you like, my little icon. So any icon, any link that opens up in a new window, I've just popped in this little image just so it's clear that these links will open up in a new website. But anything else like this just this opens up in the same, if you like, micro website. So this secure area, this is, if you like, a it's a multi-page micro website. I'm not going to call it a full-on website. And it's got a number of pages which are common, which we'll be looking at as soon as we get into the programming aspect. But I do have some CSS if you want to learn how to do certain things, even responsive panels. That happen to open up in a separate page. And this one's how to do drop-down menus, which are not relevant for this assignment, but this is pretty good if you want to have something like this in a different website, for example. And so, Alexander, I'm just seeing what you've just written. So yes, that's exactly what's going on. If there's a hyperlink, oh, that's a little bit crushed. Let me just fix that. So here we go. Here's a hyperlink whose target is _blank. So it'll only style hyperlinks that have got this attribute inside it. Just a historical thing. Target is another one of these attributes that keeps going in and out of the specification. So I think it's been brought back in. So that this element was seen as being deprecated, but I think enough people cared about this element to bring it back. And I think sometimes it is helpful to have a hyperlink that opens in a new page, just so you're not losing your location. Sometimes I find it frustrating being taken to a new page and then having to press the back button to go back to where I started. So activity number 5, moving into color models. And I think I'm going to fire up the lecture slide that I've got on this. Whoops. Move that up a little bit. So just out of interest, does anyone have any idea of, first of all, what these two different colors represent and how different are these two colors visually? So if I was to select this color and select this color, how different would they look on a page? And whilst you're thinking about, I'll have a hunt through the lecture notes and pull up the slide that I am looking for. Miroslav is saying the same colors. Matthew thinks D88 might be darker. Tim's saying identical. So got 2 good answers. So I'll just bring this back. So I do talk about this in the lecture and even the TLDR lecture, that humans don't see color well at all. So if you think of a musical instrument, it's almost like we can hear 3 notes and that's it. Every other note is missing. And not only that, there are gaps between the notes that we can see, if you like. So so when humans see orange, we don't know whether we're actually looking at orange color, like the color orange, or whether we're just seeing we're seeing a lot of red and a little bit of green light mixed together. Likewise, yellow as well. Yellow, we can fool a human into thinking a human is seeing yellow by just shining red light and green light close together. And if you look really closely at your screen, or even get a drop of water on your iPhone, you can actually see the little tiny lights glowing. So there's no yellow light, there's no orange light. It's all made up of a red channel, a green channel, and historically a navy indigo blue channel. So there's a lot of talk, how the sky is blue, but cyan has really replaced the color sky blue. In the past, I have a feeling that when people said blue, they meant sky blue. The sky is blue, blue. But the humans, we see this kind of blue indigo color, this dark blue color. And Andres has picked up that purple is a color that's unique to humans, or any animal that's got three tricolor perception. We're actually seeing a mix of red and blue, and when you see violet on the rainbow, this does look a little bit reddish, and that's because our red sensors are sensitive to violet light. So we start to see red again, which is a little bit confusing, but it does mean that we get a very nice color wheel for our colors. So what I've got here is a pixel color simulator. So it's sort of based on this red, green, blue thing here, and I'll just plug in DB8. So this is 12-bit color. So there are 16 steps per channel. So it goes all the way down to 0 to 15. So I'll back that down to D. So the red channel is glowing quite brightly. I'm going to move the green channel to halfway, and this one to halfway as well. So what we see. Oh, sorry, D. Did I say D88 or DB8? Yes, it's DB8. Should really wear my glasses. So at the moment, it looks red because the blue and green channels are the same. So it looks like it's like white light. It looks like it's gray with a little bit of white there. But if I increase the green channel to DB8, we get a sort of like a tan burleywood color. And so as part of the HTML specification, we've got a number of named words. So I think we've got maybe 100 words that actually 100 colors that has a name. But 12-bit color gives us 4,096 possible colors, because it's basically 16 steps times 16 steps times 16. I'll let you have a play around and see if you can't try and get some of these hot pink colors. So there's a lot of animals that can't see this color. They actually see a different color. And so just to reflect on what Tim's just said, I often think it's almost like Flatland, if anyone's read the book Flatland, where these creatures are living in 2 dimensions, and they're, the idea of extending your thought process into a 3rd dimension is quite hard. And of course, we're living in 3 dimensions, and to a 4-dimensional creature, we're living in a Flatland, essentially. Actually, one thing I really should think about is actually there's a website that do it so much better. So I think I've got a link in the cheat sheet. There's a link to a website. I think it's Peloton, and they actually, if you've got a color scheme, you can actually see what that color scheme looks like in a colorblind simulator. So you can see, okay, you may have lost some of the color information, but you can still see that there's good contrast, at least. And it's unfortunate that people can't see green and red. Some people can't. But what they do is they see the two colors as more or less the same sort of shade or hue. So this is 12-bit color. So there are 16 steps, and each step is pretty obvious. So when you jump a step, you can definitely see there's a color change. And another advantage of humans, when we switch to 24-bit colors, what we're doing is we're introducing another 16 steps in between each one of those steps above. So instead of specifying one number, we're actually specifying a second one. So this number is 1/16 of what this channel is. So because we've now got 256 intensity levels, because there's now 256 steps, we get 16.7 million colors. And this is useful for humans because the difference between an individual step is very hard to see. So unless you're a superhuman, I don't think you'll be able to see a color difference between any two of these. But as you progress from one to another, trust me, there is a color change. So what's represented here is the 16 sub-steps that 24-bit color offers. So really, this is all we need for humans. We don't need 36-bit color or 48-bit color. It's really pretty much wasted on any finer steps. So that's the hexadecimal format, and there's also, you can also put in alpha channel as well. So I'll just hack the script. If you want to specify how transparent the color is, so if you want the background color to come through, you can put in an alpha channel from 0 to 255 as well. And the same thing works up here as well. So you can pop in. Did that work? Oh, I've got to press enter. Click out of the box. So yeah, if you want a transparency step between 0, which is totally transparent, and 6 and 15, which is not at all transparent, you can put in another number in from 0 to F. But that's hexadecimal is not for everyone. So some people prefer decimal places. So there is this option of RGB and RGBA as well. So you can actually say what it is in decimal. But even if that's too hard, and sometimes it's very difficult to work out, is 243/4 or 2/3, you can actually put in percentages as well. So it'll work out the step in 100 steps, which is pretty good as well. So are there any questions regarding the hexadecimal format and also the RGBA formats where we can put some nice numbers in? And whenever you do an inspection in most browsers, I think what they do is they show you the 24-bit color value. And just to come back to this question here, these two numbers are the same. because it's not D0, B080. It's where it's if you like, there's actually 16 full steps from 000 to FFF. So double F, double F, double F is full. So it's like the minute hand. The minute hand goes round once as your as the hours increase. So thinking of this number as like the minute hand that goes around faster than the hour hand, that's also a helpful way of thinking about these colors, because you can be messing around trying to adjust this number and it's not really making a difference. And this is just, if you like, a real fine control as opposed to this one. So the biggest problem with specifying RGB values is you can basically make a color brighter, but you actually mess around with the hue that the color is on. So humans really see, what we see is we see a hue, which is kind of, if you like, red or orange or yellow. And what painters do, or, you know, when you shine a white light on something or you turn a white light down, really what you're adjusting is the lightness and darkness of a color, but you're keeping the hue the same. And if you're mixing gray into a color, you're decreasing its saturation. So if you want a color to go all the way from, say, mid gray to bright yellow, you're adjusting the saturation of the color. So what I find is picking a color using the HSL model, so the hue, which is, if you like, the color on the rainbow, and then adjusting the saturation and lightness, you will more often get the right shade of that color. And so it'll be brighter or less intense, so it'll be more gray than, say, the color you've selected. But you'll never get one of those awkward situations where the shades are slightly off and they're contrasting with each other, as you would do if you use the RGB model. And if you have a play around with the inspector, you will see the RGB values changing, but you can click on these buttons up and down, and if you switch into the HSL model, when you're dragging your cursor around, you'll see that the hue is staying constant, and it's only the saturation going from strong color to weak color, and the lightness, which is in this direction, which is changing. So I just want to promise you that the HSL model, it might sound complicated, but it's definitely more human friendly than the RGB model. So I've got a couple of testing your knowledge. So if you want to have a little quick quiz, please feel free to have a play with these numbers. And one other thing is, red starts at 0 and goes all the way round to 180, and then it comes back to 360, but 360 and 0 is the same place on the wheel. And I've got a little example here, so you can sort of have a play. Just to see that the hue is changing, or the shade is changing, or the lightness is changing, and what the actual channels are doing differently. So I've got quite a few questions that I'd like you to answer. And just to recap what I said last week, I have got these supplementary assignments where if you submit your answers each week and your final score ends up being on the borderline, what I can do is I can come back and have a look at your answers each week, see that you've been engaging with the course materials through the semester, and I can give you a little marks boost just to get you into the next tax bracket, if you like. So that's my little way of helping students who are on the borderline, just with some supplementary tasks. So I've got a question here. Are these two colors real colors? And if they are not, why aren't these real colors? And I think I've also answered this question as well. And we actually saw this in the, if you like, in I think the first exercise. So we've got RGB. So the red channel's on full, the indigo blue channel's on full, and there's just a little bit of green missing. So this is going to have like a sort of hot pink, purplish color. And the difference between this color and this color, and this is the thing with the RGBA, the alpha channel is not from 0 to 255, which I think is a little bit of a mistake, but I'm not going to cry too much over it. That happens to be a number between 0 and 1, which sort of is a bit messy. So that is, if you like, 50% transparent. So whatever's in the background will shine through into the foreground. This is actually, we'll be looking at shadows next week. So if you're putting any drop shadows on things, one trick to make the shadow more realistic is to make it black, but to put some transparency into it so that the background shines through. That's more realistic to what a shadow is, rather than just applying some black paint to make it look like a sort of roadrunner shadow instead. So that's pretty much the end of today's tutorial. So I'll wait for any questions you might have, and I'll just switch over to the lab. And I've just got this little bit of attention drawn. This is another example of how browsers, if you make a mistake coding, browsers don't punish you like a Java compiler would. It doesn't throw a compiler error. It just basically tries to help you out. So theoretically, if you have an element and you've accidentally given more than one element the same ID, most browsers will style all the elements with the common ID, which is technically wrong, but browsers are under no obligation to fail or throw errors. So again, just if there are no mistakes in your website, or if your website is working, you're not guaranteed that you haven't got some errors in your code or CSS. And sometimes it's only when you've got like 100 errors that things start to go wrong. So there's just so many errors, things start to go crazy. So yeah, just be aware that if you do make this mistake, it won't be obvious that you've made a mistake if you've got multiple IDs. So Andres, yeah, that's this is a common mistake, and I will say I've actually made that mistake myself. So basically, the sequence is, if you like, black is 000 or hash 000000. So that's your baseline. However, 101010 is not equal to 111, or Fs as well. In order to get to that next step, it's actually, these numbers are the same. So that does equal that color. And because otherwise, you know, you might think that 0f equals #000. So what I just typed is not there. No, there's not actually, there's not more than 16 steps, because 0 is your first step, and then, oh, actually, is that right? Yeah, this is why I keep getting confused as well. I keep thinking there are 16 steps, but it's actually 15 steps, and then there's one more step. So the first step is not, there are 16 steps between, I think. Otherwise, there wouldn't be 256 steps at the end. So if you divide 255 divided by 16, trust me, it's like the first step doesn't count. And I tell you what, this always gets me, because my brain starts playing tricks on me. But if you actually count the steps, you will see that there are 16 steps in between each one. Sorry, there's 15 steps, but there's the 16th step will take you up one. So Aramith, no, F0, F0, F0 is it's like an off-white. It's like a very light, very, very light gray color. So in the lab, I just want to, oh, here we go. Here, HSL picker. Let's go to Peloton. So I've got two links. So this link inspired me to create the color picker. So I can actually just specify it here. So F0, F0, F0. So I just type O to 2. Okay, so I'm almost on full. So it's like 240 instead of 256. So F0 is very, very close to full power. Just another update there. So what we got? 1, 2. Oh, I was hoping it would update. Yeah, just 15 more steps away from white. Whereas yes, like if FO was white, then FFF would be super white. It would be that whiter than white that laundry powders claim to be. Yeah, so this is the website. It's even got kind of like draggable color schemes. So if you want to try things out, I'm not really sold on a lot of their color schemes that they suggest, but you know, you can certainly have a play around with these dots. Sometimes a nice color scheme will pop up. But where is, I don't know if I did this last week. The link is fairly obscure. Oh, here we go. It's a very small link, and the contrast is almost as bad as Crown Casinos. So it gives you a list of the colorblind simulators. So this is due to anomaly. This is the most common one, which is it's kind of like the differences between red and green aren't super obvious. Maybe I've got that wrong. I think it even explains. Yeah, there's a tooltip that pops up here. Yeah, it's not that green and red are seen to be exactly the same color. It's like there's not too much difference. It's like a sort of mildly affecting. I think that's the type. I think my brother suffers from this type, and he can even notice when he's wearing glasses. For some reason, there's a slight difference in the way he perceives color. So I have a feeling he describes it. He can either see in color, full color, or he can see in sharp contrast. So he takes his glasses off and things are blurry, and but he can see colors really well. So this, if anyone's interested in evolution, I think what happened was primates. There was a mutation that allowed us to see in color again. For a while, mammals lost the ability to see in tricolor, but primates picked it up. So the reason why it's so prevalent is it's just taking us a while to outbreed everyone who can't see in full color, I think, is the accepted explanation. So I've got some contextual selectors, and these slides, this example here is directly linked to the advice I was giving in this activity. So if you like, this is how not to do it, and this is using contextual selectors, so it makes sure it gets every hyperlink that's inside a navigation box. And this can also be replaced. You can say main space, and that will target any hyperlink that's in a main element. And also, if you like, footer as well, if you want to have your footer links to be styled differently. So I've got an exercise to style your navigation links to be button-like. And so I sort of step you through. This is the first one where you're not really making too many changes. So you're really just making changes to color. And next week we'll be looking at fonts. So don't worry if you're like, oh no, I don't know how to adjust fonts. We'll be looking at that next week. And then finally we've got we're changing the background color as well. So we're putting in some padding. So you might not get through all of this, but this is one of the marks that's in the assignment. So I've just got this little disclaimer here. Don't worry too much. You'll be able to complete this exercise after next week's material. Sonia, tetrachromat. So that's like four colors. I was not aware of that, but I do know that there's been a lot of because this is more commonly, because men are missing a little chunk on one of the chromosomes, the sex chromosome. men are more likely to have color blindness, but yeah, it would make sense that if anyone's going to see in four colors, it's going to be women, because you've got two X chromosomes joined together. So if one is faulty, then the other one will take over. So if you've got two good ones, there's a good chance, yeah, something really good might happen. I'll have to look that up. I wasn't aware of that. So I know most insects are tetrachromatic, so they can see into the ultraviolet range. And so if you think flowers are pretty in three colors, in four colors, they're even prettier. So that's all the material I've got for this week. Yes, Andres, that's 100% correct. When you've got a backup chromosome or a backup leg on your chromosome, that definitely helps with your color blindness. And I think I'm not sure if this is true either. Like there's this thing that men are more likely to go bald, or men generally, suffer from baldness more often. And I don't know if that's been determined to be genetic or whether it's purely testosterone driven. And Andres, yeah, the mantis shrimp has got 12 colors. I learned that off the oatmeal.com. I think I put that in my lecture a few weeks ago. Yeah, they must. That you can probably write music with 12 sensors. So I've had a few questions regarding the assignment. So as I said, some people are really jumping ahead. If you find that you're writing JavaScript or jQuery in assignment 2, I just want to say you're definitely on the wrong track. But if you are concerned that something simple, such as smooth scrolling, doesn't really look good, please let me know, and I'm happy to have a look. So there are just some questions I've answered in the discussions. People thinking the simple answer is not the correct answer. I don't want to say it is the correct answer. I'm just saying some people think it's not. But if you've got any queries, please just send me a line, because you shouldn't be programming in JavaScript for assignment 2. So I hope that's a big answer to anyone else who's a little bit concerned on that. Just move that back to the off-screen window. Hmm. I'm just using Canvas's super search feature that generally doesn't find anything. Yeah, so if Peter Scott is here, I'm just referring to your question about smooth scroll functionality, and Peter was talking about using jQuery. So I just want to say, yeah, it's definitely a simple feature. So has anyone got any questions in the time remaining that I can answer? Anyone still yet to submit assignment 1? That's another question I have. Well, the other thing is, if you go to W3 Schools, don't copy all of the code. So they've got a lot of, as I said, XHTML code, which will look something like this. Lots of class equals, smooth scrolling or something. Try to just get the CSS out, and yeah, you don't need to say div I class equals navigation. Try and stick with HTML5 code. The W3 School website has been around for a very long time, and whilst they do maintain pages, you can see historically that some pages are older than others, and still have sort of, if you like, kind of old style coding. So Tim, you're asking, can you leave a section of your site half built? So are you by any chance talking about the form? So what I was trying to do is try to make the assignments of equal weighting. And so one of the design decisions I made was to have the form, all of the form appear in assignment 2. So so I'll just open up assignment 2 as well. And scroll down to the picture. So for assignment 2, I sort of want this section. So when you click on this, it will, well, it won't in assignment 2, but it should in assignment 3. So ideally, when you click on this, a synopsis area will pop up once assignment 3 rolls around. So you can just have these sort of in place so people can see them. So they don't have to be too dynamic. And but one decision I made was to move, if you like, there's a form that comes next, which has got, so when you click on this, it will actually set something in a form underneath. And just because of the marks, the way the marks were going, so this form goes underneath. So if you're bored and you think you're just racing through assignment 2, feel free to do extra work. You can definitely put that in. It doesn't actually need to work or be wired up. And I can even have maybe a quick look and just give you some kind of feed forward advice on, maybe you've got type equals text instead of type equals email for the email field, or something subtle like that. So if you want to get a head start, I will give you some feedback, even though there's no marks in assignment 2 for this work. So Yeah, if the question is, can I leave something half built, as long as it's assignment 3 work that's half built, it's perfectly fine. Just make sure you don't have any assignment 2 work that's half built in assignment 2. So does that answer your question, Tim? Actually, is anyone doing any courses with Halil by any chance? I'm not sure if he's teaching any courses this period. Actually, Sonia, you've asked a fairly good question. I'll just have a quick sneak peek at your assignment, Sonia. That's a pretty funky font. I see what you mean. So what I'm looking at is Sonia's got a fairly space age font that's probably going to be very hard to track down. If you put in, so I'm just looking at your code. So you've got a header element and then you've got a div. So what I recommend you do is change the div to a H1 element, and then have alt equals Leonardo Cinema. And that way a search engine can pick up that the image's alt tag is Leonardo Cinema. And because it's in a H1 element, it'll recognize it as being a H1 element. So so yeah, I can see you've got some black text there, I think. Is that right? But I really like this. It's quite a nice sort of like 3D pipey font. It is the Leonardo Cinema. Just bear in mind, there's only one cinema, so you've got an S there. So I would discreetly drop the S from your logo. I'll just hit Shift refresh, see if that makes a difference. Uh-oh. My browser's frozen. Oh, it's come back to life now. No, it's definitely got some issue going on at the moment. So if I'm dropping out, I'm just my fan is spinning very fast. So I don't know if you've got any JavaScript in this page, but I'm just going to close it just to see if that helps. Okay. So Robert, yeah, you've asked a question regarding the pricing section. That's good. Okay, so back to assignment 2. So I provided provided you with a table which has got the seat code. So if you like, this is just this is like technical information. It's not for the website, so don't sort of copy and paste this into your website. I don't mind tables as long as they're pretty, but this hopefully is ugly enough for you to appreciate it. It shouldn't be in a web page, but you can, if you like. This is all the information you need. How you convey that information to the client or to the customer, sorry, is up to you. But yeah, so something like this might be in a hidden field if you're making selections, but you're not. Or put it this way, it can be hidden from the user. It could be hidden. So the user sees something nice, but the computer will receive a seat code rather than a description of the seat, which we'll have to go through. So I'm seeing, so I've got a couple of advanced students. I think if Nathan, I think it's Nathan. So someone called Nathan had a very nice Leonardo, even has a neon sign, which I was quite impressed by. Just wondering if it was rendered in Maya or Blender or something. And so, if you have a picture of the seats, maybe the standard seats and the deluxe seats, you can sort of build the prices around the product. So you see the picture and you see the prices. Whereas a table, you've kind of got to go through the table and, read the lines and read these columns. And even this, I'm hoping that you guys can come up with better ways of saying this. So even if it's laid out, yeah, what I'm doing is I'm providing you the information, and I want to see how you synthesize this and work out a sort of like a cool, funky way of showing this information on the web page. So, Robert, have I sort of answered your question? What I'm trying to do is test your higher order thinking. Like, in fact, I even give a little bit of a clue as to one path you might take. I've even spelt matinee correctly, if that's a big enough hint. Cool. So whilst I'm waiting for your questions, I'm just fixing up my picture, my profile picture, which seems to have broken. Okay, so hopefully my picture is now back to normal. Yay, my face is back. That's good. So if there are no more questions, I'll close to tonight's session. and let you guys get back to your assignment work, perhaps. Feel like one of those auctioneers saying, any last bids? Going once, going twice. Okay, so Miroslav saying good night. Okay, I think that's we're all good from everyone. I do keep an eye on the discussion boards. So please please don't feel shy about asking any questions, any clarifications, and also, just another thing, Canvas's email system, it destroys images. So please, if you're sending me images, use real email. It's a better technology. Oh, Sonia, yes, the Plato's Cave allegory. That's definitely that's another. That's probably the inspiration for Flatland, I think. Getting into philosophy 101 now. So I'll say good night to everyone, but I will keep the chat window open for a little while. So if anyone wants to chat, I'll stop the broadcast, and but I'll still keep this chat window open to answer any questions. So I'll see you all next week.